Welcome to Lunch with the Lord. I'm Pastor Mark. We're in Titus chapter 1. We're going to be starting in verse 5 this lesson. But before we begin, Jeremiah chapter 15 and verse 16. Thy words were found, and I did eat them, and thy word was unto me the joy and the rejoicing of my heart. Now, as we start verse 5, verses 5 through 9 deal with the qualifications of elders and bishops. And we're going to be looking only at verses 5 and 6 in this lesson. But Paul here in this portion, he wants Titus to ordain qualified elders in the churches on Crete because of what we will study in verses 10 through 16. It is to keep the churches healthy in the faith and to protect them from the influence and teachings of the false teachers. This is what elders and pastors in churches, this is what they should be doing. Every generation has its own false teachers and its own false prophets to turn away people from the truth. It is vital for the spiritual health of every believer that elders be qualified to lead the people into truth. Good elders will be a defense against false teachings. False teachers and false deceivers are already spreading their influences in the churches of Crete. And Paul, he wants the hearts of the believers to be protected. So he now is going to instruct Titus on ordaining elders. So let's read verse 5. For this cause I left you in Crete, that you should set in order the things that are wanting, and ordain elders in every city, as I had appointed thee. Now, he says here, I left you in Crete. Again, Paul's visit to Crete had to be after being released from his first imprisonment. Obviously, Titus was with him, and maybe some other people that were traveling with him. Now, it doesn't seem that Luke was traveling with him at this time. But it seems that usually Paul didn't travel alone, and he didn't usually travel with one person. There were usually a few people that traveled with him on his journeys. Paul was there long enough to help start a few churches in cities on the island. But Paul left before he was able to ordain elders who would stay and preach and strengthen the believers in those churches. Now, it may be that when Paul left the island, that men in the churches were not ready to be ordained. Paul told Timothy not to appoint men to leadership roles too quickly, lest they be lifted up with pride. That's seen in 1 Timothy chapter 3 and verse 6. So, again, Paul wants Titus to ordain elders. Elders were basically elders and bishops. We're talking about the same position of a pastor. And he wants him to ordain pastors in the churches on the island. But it's very possible that, when Paul was there, the men weren't ready to be ordained. They didn't have enough understanding yet. But maybe now they seem to be that they are able to be ordained. Titus must visit these churches and look for men whom God is raising up to be a leader in the church, and then to instruct them. So he says here, for this cause I left you in Crete, that you should do what? That you should set in order. Now, the Greek word for set in order It is a medical term that is used for the setting of broken bones or the straightening of crooked bones. Paul wants Titus to set in order things in the church that had been left undone. People were being saved, and they were meeting in people's houses, but there was no definite structure to the church assembly. Setting the churches in an organized manner was the first thing Paul wanted Titus to do. The second thing is that he wanted him to do was to ordain elders in what? In every city where there were churches. Paul describes the same person using two different words. He uses the word elder and he uses the word bishop. Now, elder speaks of their maturity in the Lord, not their age. This is spiritual maturity. A pastor or an elder in a church can be at a somewhat early age. So again, when he says here ordain elders, he's talking about ordaining men that are spiritually mature. And that could be, again, at any age. It doesn't just mean that, they're going to be somebody that's in their 60s or 70s or 80s. It could be a younger type of a person also if they're mature in the Lord. When Paul said not to ordain someone too quickly, what Paul meant was for people to have some time pass so that they can go through trials to strengthen their faith. It is to give God time to test them in situations to show themselves faithful to God and to his word. So again, Paul tells Timothy, don't ordain men too quickly. Why? Give God a chance to work in their life, to bring situations, trials, troubles, maybe a little persecution, and to strengthen their faith and to see which way they're going to go. If they're going to go towards God and his word, or if they're going to go back towards the world. So if you don't ordain someone too quickly, give God a chance to test their hearts. Too many times people are asked to be a deacon or an elder in a church who have only been saved for just a few months or a year or two. They may be very friendly and they may be very likable and good with money or have a business mind, but their walk with God may be lacking. They may be still attached to things of this world. Don't be too impressed by new believers. Be impressed when you see them making good decisions for God and for his word when? In difficult times. That's when you should be impressed. Be impressed with when a person gives their heart to Christ. Don't be too quickly to start promoting them. Give God a chance to work in their hearts and see if they're going to make positive decisions towards God and towards his word when they go through difficult times. Then the word bishop that Paul uses here, bishop, is this second word that he uses. Elder describes his maturity, while the word bishop describes the office that he holds. Now, the Greek word for bishop is episkopos, and it means an overseer, an administrator. Bishop means that he oversees and he administrates the church. At the time of our context, he would make sure that the services are conducted in an orderly way, and he would make sure that the purity of the gospel was being taught in order to strengthen his people's hearts against any false teachings. It is still the same today. even though we live in a completely different time of history with so many new advances in technology. The office of elder and bishop hasn't changed. Elder speaks of maturity in the Lord. Bishop speaks of their position of what they're supposed to do. Titus was to ordain these elders under the authority of being a representative of Paul. In a sense, Paul authorized Titus to do two things: to set the churches in order and to ordain elders. So, in a sense, if you want, you could look at Paul as being the foreman, and not the foreman, but Paul being the supervisor, and under him is a foreman, and the supervisor says to the foreman, I want you to have the men do this and do this and do this. And the foreman goes out and he tells the men to do this and this and this. and that's kind of what it is. Paul is giving his authority to Titus to implement these things. Now, let's read verse 6. And it says here, and if any be blameless, the husband of one wife, having faithful children, not accused of riot or unruly. Now, in verses 6 through 9, Paul gives a list of qualities that an elder or bishop must have if they will be a representative of the gospel and of God's kingdom. They should be the standard that people look to. Paul wants the gospel to be properly represented. Now, I will not comment on all of these qualities that Paul lists in verses 6 through 9, but I do want to pick out a few and expound on their meaning. The first is blameless. Now, the Greek word means that they live in such a way that no one would be able to bring a charge against them. Now, I think being blameless also includes what is written in 1 Thessalonians chapter 5 and verse 22. Abstain, to be blameless, Paul says in 1 Thessalonians 5:22, he says, abstaining from all appearance of evil. The elder or the bishop or the pastor of the church, they need to live their life beyond being accused of sin or evil. Christians often get tempted to go to places, say things, do things that would cause other Christians or non-believers to question their relationship to God, and even question their Christianity or question Christianity in general. And they do it because they feel that they have a freedom in Christ, not being under the law but under grace. So here, listen, sometimes Christians say, they think to themselves, well, I'm a Christian now. I'm not under the law. I don't have to live. Jesus set me free from that law. Therefore, I'm not have to be in bondage to it anymore. Well, no. The world is watching, saved and unsaved. And they see you doing things, you're saying things, and they're watching. And a lot of times, with the unsaved world, the only Bible people read is your life. That's it. And your life will either draw them to the Word of God, draw them to the heart of God, or draw them away from the heart of God. So, yeah, we have freedom, but as Paul said in Romans chapter 14, Paul says, look, I can eat meat, I have the right to do these things, but if it's going to offend my brother, I'm not going to do it. If it's going to hurt my brother or sister's walk in the Lord, I'm not going to do it. And we should do the same also with the unsaved. Well, I don't, they need to know that we're free in the Lord and we can do things like this. No. If it's going to make them stumble, if it's going to make an unsaved person stumble and not come to Christ, then we need to abstain from, even though we have a right to do things, we need to abstain for their sake. Christians need to watch their steps and take it seriously how God and the Bible and Christianity are perceived by how they live their life. Now he says here in verse 6, he says the husband of one wife. Now this does not mean one wife for their whole life. It means one wife, one wife at a time. Remember, polygamy was still being practiced during Paul's time. Then he says, having faithful children. Now, this does not mean that if your children are not saved, then you can't be an elder or a bishop or a pastor of a church. Listen, every person is an individual and is responsible for their own decisions. There are many good, godly parents who have wayward children. They train them up in the ways of the Lord, but their children have what? They have decided to walk a different path. This should not prevent a person from pastoring a church, or teaching a Bible study, or teaching a Sunday school, being an elder or a deacon. They shouldn't be held back or shouldn't be held hostage until their children get saved. Because why? Their children may never get saved. The last part of verse 6 explains that the children of prospective elders and pastors, not to be accused of riotous behavior or to be unruly, meaning disobedient to parents or rejecting authority. Now, these two characteristics bring out the raising of the children in the home. Young children before they are out on their own. If the parent is not capable of teaching obedience or order to their children, well, then they can't be expected to be of any value to help guide believers that are in the church. Now, again, children do not have to become saved. That is based on their own free will, but they do need to be obedient and trustworthy children. So again, children don't have to be saved in order for men to be elders and deacons, for women to teach in Bible studies. No, they have their own they have their own free will, and as long as they raise their children in a godly way, and they bring them up in the Lord, they read the Bible to them when they're young, pray with them, teach them about God, the things of God. Well, then you just have to let them go as they grow older. And if they go towards the Lord, that's great. And if they don't go towards the Lord, well, you did what you were supposed to do. You trained them up, and now you put them in God's hands. It is possible that Paul intended to mean that the children have to be saved. Yes, but we know that children becoming saved is not always going to happen. The children of a pastor or an elder or a deacon, it would be nice if they got saved, but if they don't, that's not supposed to hold their parents back at all. Again, Paul may have meant, the children have to be saved, but that's not always the case. The kids, they have their own decision unto God. The first part of verse 7 can be reworded: the steward of God must be blameless. We're going to start in verse 7 next lesson, but until then, walk with the Lord. I know he walks with you.